This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. The following broadcast is being transmitted at the request of the United States Department of Defense and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. This is a nationwide emergency alert. As of 0600 hours Eastern Standard Time, the President of the United States has declared a state of national emergency in response to widespread outbreaks of an unidentified pathogen causing extreme aggression and violent behavior among infected individuals. This declaration authorizes the full deployment of military resources and the implementation of crisis protocols across all 50 states and U.S. territories. The situation is evolving rapidly. Confirmed reports indicate that major population centers including New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, and Miami are experiencing severe civil unrest and breakdown of standard emergency services. The infected individuals, identifiable by erratic movements, apparent disorientation, and extreme aggression, do not respond to verbal commands, pain compliance techniques, or non-lethal force. Medical authorities have classified this as a Category 5 biohazard. While the exact transmission vector remains under investigation, preliminary findings suggest the pathogen spreads through direct fluid contact, primarily blood and saliva. The incubation period appears to be extremely short, with transformation occurring within 45 minutes to 3 hours following exposure. Law enforcement agencies nationwide are currently overwhelmed. National Guard units have been activated in all states, and active military personnel are being deployed to establish containment zones and extraction points. However, resources are stretched thin. Citizens must understand you are your own first line of defense. Immediate civilian directives. The following orders are mandatory and enforceable under the Emergency Powers Act. Remain indoors. We repeat, remain indoors. Secure all entry points to your current location immediately. Use furniture, appliances, or any heavy objects to barricade doors and ground floor windows. Cover all windows to prevent being seen from outside. If you are currently in a vehicle or public space, seek the nearest secure building immediately and remain there. Do not attempt to travel, especially after sundown. Roadways are compromised throughout much of the country. Traffic gridlock, abandoned vehicles, and military checkpoints have rendered most evacuation routes impassable. Attempting to flee populated areas has resulted in numerous civilian casualties. Your best chance of survival is to shelter in place until military assistance can reach your area. Avoid ALA contact with individuals displaying symptoms of infection. These include, but are not limited to, discoloration around the eyes and mouth, visible bleeding from facial orifices, uncoordinated movements, guttural vocalizations, and unprovoked aggression. Do not attempt to reason with or provide aid to such individuals, regardless of prior personal relationships. The infected no longer recognize family members, friends, or authority figures. Conserve water and food supplies immediately. Fill all available containers with water while municipal systems remain operational. Gather non-perishable food items and organize them for efficient rationing. Current estimates suggest civilians should prepare for a minimum of 30 days without external support or supply lines. Maintain communication silence unless absolutely necessary. Cell networks are currently experiencing unprecedented congestion and many towers are offline. Conserve phone battery power for emergency communications only. Text messaging requires less bandwidth and may function when voice calls fail. Situation assessment. The origins of this pathogen remain classified. Special research units from the CDC, USAM are at aid, and who are working to identify containment and treatment protocols. Until such measures are developed, the primary strategy is isolation and quarantine of affected areas. Reports from medical personnel who have examined the infected describe unprecedented physiological changes. The pathogen appears to attack the central nervous system while simultaneously accelerating certain metabolic functions. Infected individuals demonstrate heightened strength and aggression coupled with severely diminished pain response and cognitive function. Standard injuries that would incapacitate a normal human being do not stop the infected unless the brainstem is severely damaged or destroyed. Military analysts estimate that approximately 23% of the national population has been exposed to the pathogen as of this broadcast. The infection rate appears to follow an exponential curve, with urban centers experiencing the most rapid spread. Rural areas with lower population density currently report fewer incidents, but isolation does not guarantee safety. National strategic reserves have been activated, and emergency production of essential supplies has been authorized under the Defense Production Act. However, citizens must understand that the scale of this crisis exceeds immediate response capabilities. Self-reliance is essential for short-term survival. Military response operations. The United States Armed Forces have implemented Operation Bulwark, a nationwide containment and civilian protection initiative. The following actions are currently underway. Army and Marine Corps units are establishing defensive perimeters around critical infrastructure. including power plants, water treatment facilities, and strategic command centers. These locations will serve as operational hubs for recovery efforts. Do not attempt to approach these facilities without explicit military authorization. Deadly force protocols are in effect. Air Force assets are conducting aerial surveillance to map infection spread patterns and identify potential extraction zones. Helicopter gunships are providing tactical support to ground forces in heavily compromised areas. Citizens should be aware that low-flying aircraft may be present over residential areas without prior notice. Navy hospital ships have been deployed to coastal cities to provide offshore medical support, reducing the risk of pathogen exposure to medical personnel. Only critically injured non-infected patients will be transported to these vessels. Special operations teams are conducting targeted extraction of essential personnel, including key scientific researchers, medical specialists, and government leadership. These operations will not be publicly announced or confirmed. Engineers from all branches are constructing fortified safe zones in strategic locations nationwide. These facilities will eventually serve as civilian rescue centers, but they are not yet operational. Any claims of open, safe zones circulating on social media or through word of mouth should be treated with extreme skepticism. Numerous civilian casualties have resulted from attempts to reach premature or falsified evacuation points. Threat assessment and civilian awareness. Understanding the nature of the infected is critical to survival. Military and CDC observations have yielded the following intelligence. The infected appear drawn to sound, light, and movement. They demonstrate rudimentary pack behavior when in groups larger than 3 individuals. Avoiding detection is your primary survival tactic. While the infected display decreased cognitive function, they retain basic problem-solving abilities. Simple barriers may not deter them indefinitely. Multiple layers of obstacles provide the most effective deterrent. The infected can maintain aggressive activity for extended periods without apparent fatigue. They do not sleep in a conventional sense, but may enter brief periods of reduced activity when not actively pursuing prey. Conventional firearms are effective against the infected, but should be used only as a last resort. Discharge of weapons will attract additional infected to your location. If armed confrontation is unavoidable, destruction of the brainstem is the only reliable method of neutralization. The infected are not confined to a slow shuffling gait as depicted in popular media. Many retain the full mobility they possessed before infection, making them capable of running, climbing, and performing basic physical tasks. Do not assume you can outpace them in open terrain. Infection appears to be 100% fatal with 100% reanimation rate. No successful treatments have been documented. Any individual who has been bitten or otherwise exposed to infected bodily fluids must be considered a potential carrier and isolated immediately. Resources and communication protocols. Emergency broadcast stations will remain operational as long as power infrastructure allows. All citizens should maintain a battery-powered or hand-crank radio for updates. Official broadcasts will begin with the emergency alert tone followed by the authentication code, Eco Sierra Alpha 793. Any broadcast lacking this verification should be considered potentially compromised or unofficial. The National Emergency Information website has been converted to a low-bandwidth text-only format accessible at emergency.gov. The site will provide updated safety information and location data for operational military checkpoints when connectivity is available. Military convoys will periodically move through accessible areas to extract civilians to safe zones. These operations will be announced via emergency broadcast with at least 2 hours with a notice when possible. Be prepared to move quickly with minimal belongings if extraction is announced for your area. Each person is permitted 1 backpack or small bag containing essential items only. For those with specialized medical training, mechanical engineering skills, or military law enforcement background, register your capabilities and location at the emergency Gov site if internet access is available. These skills are crucial to recovery efforts, and qualified individuals may be prioritized for extraction. Psychological Preparedness Advisory. The National Institute of Mental Health advises all citizens to acknowledge the psychological impact of this crisis. The following guidance may help maintain mental resilience or establish routines even in crisis conditions. Designated times for meals, sleep, and activities provide psychological structure and reduce stress. If sheltering with others, establish clear leadership and responsibility assignments. Structure reduces conflict in prolonged emergency situations. Conserve mental energy by focusing on immediate survival needs rather than speculating about national or global outcomes. Information management is as important as resource management. Prepare mentally for difficult decisions. Standard moral frameworks may be challenged by crisis conditions. Focus on survival while maintaining core human values when possible. For those sheltering with children, provide age-appropriate explanations without graphic details. Involve them in simple preparedness tasks to maintain a sense of purpose and reduce anxiety. Containment zone information. Military authorities have established a 3-tier containment classification system: red zones, areas with infection rates exceeding 60% of the population. These regions are currently considered beyond immediate recovery capabilities. No civilian extraction operations are underway in red zones at this time. If you are located in a red zone, maintain absolute concealment and await further instructions. Yellow zones, areas with infection rates between 20% and 59%. Limited military presence with defensive operations only. Civilian extraction is occurring on a limited basis, prioritizing vulnerable populations. Maintain shelter in place unless directly contacted by military personnel. Green zones, areas with infection rates below 20%. Active military control with established perimeters. These regions are the focus of current containment efforts. If you are in a green zone, comply with all military directives immediately and without question. Current zone designations by county are available at emergency. Gov1 Connections Permit. Be advised that zone classifications may change rapidly as conditions evolve. Medical advisory. Medical facilities nationwide are operating beyond capacity. Do not attempt to reach hospitals or urgent care centers unless facing immediately life-threatening non-infection related injuries. All major medical facilities have been compromised to some degree, and many have been abandoned or converted to military field operations. For those with chronic medical conditions requiring prescription medications, ration existing supplies conservatively. Federal authorities have suspended enforcement of prescription refill limitations, allowing pharmacies to provide emergency supplies when available. Documentation requirements have been waived for critical medications. For immediate emergency care when professional medical help is unavailable, control bleeding with direct pressure and elevation. Improvised tourniquets should be used only for catastrophic limb hemorrhage when all other methods fail. Maintain body temperature. Hypothermia compromises immune function and cognitive ability, both essential for survival. Prioritize wound cleaning to prevent secondary infections. Untreated conventional infections may become life-threatening as antibiotic availability decreases. For mental health emergencies, including panic attacks or acute stress responses, implement breathing control techniques and focus on immediate environmental awareness. When possible, maintain human connection while practicing appropriate safety protocols. Final advisory and outlook. Citizens must understand the gravity of this situation. This is not a temporary disruption of normal services. The fabric of modern society has been compromised on a fundamental level. Recovery will require unprecedented national resilience and cooperation. Military and government leaders remain operational through secure channels. Command and control structures continue to function, though with limited capacity in heavily affected regions. The continuity of government has been maintained through activation of designated succession protocols and secure facilities. International borders have been sealed by mutual agreement with neighboring nations. No unauthorized cross-border travel is permitted. Limited international aid is being coordinated through secure military channels, but domestic resources remain the primary support mechanism. Research teams continue working around the clock to develop countermeasures. Early tests show limited promise for treatments that may slow progression of the pathogen, though no cure has been identified. The most optimistic projections suggest containment as the only viable strategy for the immediate future. Despite the dire nature of this crisis, citizens should understand that capitulation is not an option being considered by leadership. The full resources of the nation remain committed to survival and eventual recovery. America has faced existential threats throughout its history and has prevailed through unity and determination. This emergency broadcast will repeat every hour on the hour. Additional information will be provided as it becomes available and verified. Stay alert, stay alive. For the safety of yourself and others, compliance with these directives is not optional. Under the National Emergencies Act and the Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act, failure to comply with emergency directives may result in detention or other necessary measures to ensure public safety. Remember, this is not a test. May God help us all. Safety measures and survival guidelines. This is a continuation of the National Emergency Broadcast. Authentication code ACO Sierra Alpha 793. The following information contains critical survival instructions approved by the Department of Defense, FIMA, and the CDC. All citizens are strongly advised to implement these measures immediately. As the containment effort continues, civilian self-sufficiency remains paramount. Military and emergency resources are prioritizing critical infrastructure and strategic locations. The following guidelines have been compiled by survival experts and military personnel with experience in hostile territory operations. Your adherence to these protocols may determine your survival in the coming weeks. Fortification and shelter security. Your immediate priority should be transforming your current location into a defensible position. The infected are drawn to signs of human activity and will attempt to breach any shelter once detected. Implement the following measures without delay. Conduct a thorough assessment of your shelter's vulnerabilities. Focus on ground floor entry points, including windows, doors, basement accesses, and any ventilation openings larger than 6 inches in diameter. Remember that standard residential construction is not designed to withstand determined physical assault. Reinforce all doors with heavy furniture placed at 45-degree angles to create wedge barriers. Remove door handles from the outside of interior doors when possible to provide additional barricaded rooms if outer defenses fail. Use metal brackets, screws, nails, or wire to secure barricades to fixed points when available. Windows present a significant vulnerability. Cover all windows with heavy blankets or sheets to prevent light from escaping at night, which can attract the infected. For reinforcement, consider removing bookshelves, cabinet doors, or interior doors and securing them across window frames. Create overlapping layers rather than relying on a single barrier. If time and resources permit, consider moving to a higher floor and creating a barricaded stairwell. The infected retain basic climbing abilities, but have demonstrated difficulty with coordinated vertical movement against resistance. Removing several steps from staircases and creating rope or ladder systems that can be retracted has proven effective in multiple, documented cases. Designate emergency exits in case your primary defenses are breached. Every shelter should have at least 2 evacuation routes that can be accessed quickly. These should lead to predetermined secondary shelter locations. Practice reaching these routes in darkness, as power failures are now widespread and flashlights may attract unwanted attention. For multi-person households, establish a security rotation with designated watch periods. Even with secured entry points, constant vigilance is necessary. Adult members should maintain a schedule allowing for adequate rest while ensuring continuous monitoring of potential breach points. Create a silent alarm system using string with attached noise makers for early warning of intrusion attempts. Noise and light discipline. The infected demonstrate heightened sensory response to both auditory and visual stimuli. Strict adherence to the following protocols consistently correlated with improved survival. Rate tests maintain near total silence, particularly during daylight hours when the infected are most active. Communicate using hand signals, written notes, or whispers only when necessary. Secure or disable any devices that may create unexpected noise, including cell phones, watches with alarms, timers, and household appliances. All conversation should occur in interior rooms away from potential entry points. Volume should never exceed a whisper. Children must be clearly instructed on the importance of noise discipline. Lives depend on their cooperation. Cover all windows with multiple layers of light-blocking material. Blackout curtains, blankets, or cardboard covered with dark fabric are recommended. Inspect these coverings for gaps by having one person remain outside after dark, when safe, to identify light leakage while another moves through interior spaces with emergency lighting. If illumination is absolutely necessary, use the following guidelines. Restrict lighting to interior rooms with no exterior walls when possible. Use the minimum amount of light required for the task. Shield all light sources with multiple layers of fabric. Red filters on flashlights or headlamps reduce visibility from outside. Never use candles or open flames except in extreme emergencies. Fire risk compounds your danger. Be aware that the infected have demonstrated increased activity during nighttime hours. Military intelligence suggests this may be due to reduced sensory competition after dark, allowing them to more easily detect subtle signs of human presence. Your greatest safety margin exists during the 2 hours immediately after dawn, when the infected often exhibit temporarily decreased activity. Resource management. Current intelligence suggests this situation may persist for an extended period. The following resource management protocols should be implemented immediately. Water conservation and sourcing. Municipal water systems are failing in approximately 63% of affected areas. While water remains available, fill every available container. Bathtubs, sinks, plastic storage bins, and water bottles should all be utilized. Prioritize clean containers for drinking water. Establish a strict water rationing system immediately. The minimum survival requirement is approximately 2 quarts of 64 ounces per person per day for drinking, with additional needs for sanitation. Reduce consumption by using moist towelettes for personal hygiene instead of water when possible. Implementing military-style bird baths, using minimal water for essential cleaning. Creating a closed system for brushing teeth that requires no rinsing. Using gray water used washing water for toilet flushing if plumbing remains functional. Rainwater collection systems should be established where possible. Even simple systems using tarps or plastic sheeting directed into containers can yield significant supply. All collected water should be purified using one of the following methods. Boiling for a minimum of 1 full minute, add 1 minute for every 1,000 feet above sea level. Water purification tablets according to manufacturer instructions. Unscented household bleach at a ratio of 8 drops per gallon. Stir and let stand for 30 minutes. Food rationing. Conduct an immediate inventory of all available food supplies. Prioritize consumption of perishable items while refrigeration remains functional. As power fails, transition to non-perishable goods according to a strict rationing schedule. Adult caloric intake can be reduced to approximately 1,200 to 1,500 calories per day while maintaining basic function. Distribute these calories across 2 small meals to conserve resources while maintaining energy levels. Children, pregnant women, and the elderly should receive priority for nutritional resources. High protein and high foods provide greater satiety and sustained energy. Prioritize these over simple carbohydrates when options exist. Peanut butter, canned fish, nuts, and canned beans offer superior nutritional value for survival situations. Noise-producing food preparation should be restricted to the 2-hour post-dawn window when infected activity is reduced. Pre-prepare meals when possible to minimize noise and light requirements. Consider non-traditional food sources if supplies dwindle. Many common household items have nutritional value, including pet food. Dry kibble can be softened with water if necessary. Bird seed can be ground and added to other foods. Flour, baking ingredients, and dried goods from rarely accessed pantry areas. Canned goods often overlooked such as pumpkin, water chestnuts, or bamboo shoots. Medical supply management. Establish a centralized medical kit containing all available first aid supplies. Add household items with medical applications, including clean white cotton sheets or t-shirts if for bandages, and super glue S for closing small wounds. A whiskey or high-proof alcoholic disinfectant. Honeys and antibacterial properties for wound care. Tampons or maxi pads if for traumatic bleeding control. Inventory all prescription medications and implement strict rationing protocols. Many maintenance medications can be reduced to 3/4 or even half dosage to extend a supply in emergency situations, though this should be avoided if possible. For life-sustaining medications such as insulin, heart medications, or seizure control, document current supply and consumption rate. This information will be required for prioritization if military extraction becomes available in your area. Energy and power. Electrical grid failure is now widespread. Implement the following power conservation measures. Charge all devices while power remains available. Utilize battery-operated devices only when absolutely necessary. Consolidate essential functions requiring power to minimize battery usage. Disable power drawing functions on devices GPS, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi when not in use. Create a charging priority list with communication devices at the top. For those with solar chargers, generators, or other alternative power sources, operation of these devices creates noise and visible activity that may attract the infected. Use exclusively during daylight hours, preferably during the post-dawn safety window. Battery-powered radios should be used sparingly, with 1 designated listening period per day to conserve power while maintaining information awareness. The National Emergency Broadcast System will transmit major updates at southern 900 hours daily on all AMs of FM frequencies. Emergency communications. Telecommunications infrastructure is degrading rapidly. Cell towers are operating at approximately 28% capacity nationwide, with function primarily maintained in areas with a supplementary military power generators. Internet connectivity is limited to strategic command centers and is not available for civilian use. If you must attempt emergency communication, text messages require less bandwidth and have higher delivery success rates than voice calls. Keep messages under 160 characters to transmit as single SMS rather than multi-part messages. Include exact location information in all communications. Use clear, concise language without abbreviations that might be misinterpreted. For areas with persistent cellular connectivity, the Emergency Alert System has established a text response protocol. Text status to 67283 to receive automated updates for your geographic region when available. For homes equipped with emergency radios or ham radio equipment, military communication centers are monitoring frequencies 146 MHz at the top of 6M each hour for civilian distress calls. Transmit only essential information using the following format. Location as specific as possible. Number of uninfected survivors. Immediate threats or resource critically in need. Any specialized skills or resources available in medical personnel. Available transportation, etc. Travel and movement restrictions. Civilian movement outside of secured shelters remains extremely hazardous. Military intelligence reports substantial casualties among those attempting self-evacuation. If movement becomes absolutely necessary, adhere to the following protocols. Travel should be restricted to the period between 1 hour after sunrise and 4 hours before sunset. The infected demonstrate reduced identification capabilities in bright daylight, though this advantage is minimal and should not be overestimated. Plan all routes using updated intelligence when available. Military reconnaissance teams are marking clear roads in some regions using red tape on the left side of roadways. These markings indicate recently cleared paths, but offer no guarantee of continued safety. If traveling by vehicle, maintain speed below 40 miles per hour to avoid noise attraction. Cover all windows except the minimum required for visibility, or prepare for abandoned vehicles and obstacles requiring route adjustment. Carry basic tools for removing obstacles, bolt cutters, pry bars, etc. Have a contingency plan for vehicle disablement. If traveling on foot, move in groups of no fewer than 3 individuals. Maintain diamond formation with strongest individuals at point and rear. Designate specific observation sectors for each person forward, right, left, rear. Use hand signals exclusively for communication, but carry only essential items distributed evenly among group members. Remain hydrated but restrict food consumed to prevent performance, reducing digestive activity. Extreme caution. Intelligence reports indicate multiple instances of false evacuation broadcasts and fabricated safe zone notifications leading civilians into ambush situations. Military extraction operations follow strict protocols. Official extraction teams include a minimum of 4 armed personnel. All legitimate military personnel carry identification verifiable by UV light. Official operations will reference the authentication code broadcast at 900 hours. Military extraction teams will never request civilians to surrender weapons or supplies. If you encounter a suspected false evacuation team, disengage immediately and return to shelter. Do not confront or challenge such groups, as they may represent desperate survivors, rather than deliberate threats. Defense against the infected. While avoidance remains the optimal strategy, all civilians should understand basic defensive principles should direct confrontation become unavoidable. The infected cannot be reasoned with or deterred through intimidation. Their neurological functions have been compromised to the point where only basic predatory instincts remain. Vocal warnings, threatening displays, or warning shots are ineffective and counterproductive. In confirmed encounters, maintain distance as the primary objective. The infected transmit the pathogen through fluid contact, with bites being the primary vector. Any physical engagement substantially increases exposure risk. The infected demonstrate the following exploitable weaknesses: compromised balance and coordination, particularly when changing direction; inability to implement complex problem solving; reduced visual acuity, particularly in distinguishing stationary objects; no tactical coordination when in groups, creating opportunities for diversion. If defensive measures become necessary, understand that only catastrophic damage to the brainstem will permanently neutralize an infected individual. Center mass targeting, limb shots, or other conventional stopping methods are ineffective. For those without firearms, improvised weapons should focus on maintaining distance while enabling precision targeting of the head. Recommended options included spears created from broom handles with secured kitchen knives, baseball bats with protruding nails or screws at the striking end, machetes or similar cutting tools secured to poles for extended reach. For firearm owners, ammunition conservation is critical. Establish the following priorities: single, precise shots rather than rapid fire; engagement only when escape is impossible; minimum safe distance whenever possible to improve accuracy; immediate relocation following any firearms discharge, as the noise will attract additional infected. Military observation indicates the infected can maintain aggressive pursuit for up to 72 hours without rest when stimulated by awareness of human targets. Simply outrunning or outlasting them is not a viable strategy. Breaking line of sight and establishing concealment is essential to terminating pursuit. Psychological survival strategies. The psychological impact of this crisis cannot be overstated. Mental resilience will prove as important as physical security in the coming weeks. Implement the following practices. Maintain a structured schedule despite external chaos. Designated times for sleep, meals, security checks, and even limited recreation provide psychological stability and prevent deterioration of group cohesion. Implement deliberate information control. Designate specific times for situation assessment and planning, while allowing situation-free periods where focus shifts to immediate tasks and limited normalcy. Constant vigilance leads to decision fatigue and deteriorating judgment. For those sheltering with multiple individuals, establish clear leadership and decision-making protocols. Democratic processes are inefficient in crisis situations. Designate specific individuals for key responsibilities based on relevant skills and temperament. Monitor for signs of acute stress response, including excessive startle reaction, intrusive thoughts or flashbacks, emotional numbing, sleep disturbances, aggressive outbursts, paranoid ideation. Address these symptoms through tactical breathing of 4-count inhale, 4-count hold, 4-count exhale, 4-count hold. Grounding techniques identifying 5s you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. A cognitive reframing of catastrophic thoughts. A brief physical exercise when noise concerns permit. Maintenance of human connection through non-verbal communication. For those sheltering with children, maintain age-appropriate structure while acknowledging the reality of the situation. Children benefit from clear, simple explanations without graphic details. A specific assigned responsibilities that contribute to group security. A scheduled time for quiet play or education to maintain developmental normalcy. Regular reassurance through physical contact when verbal communication is restricted. Involvement in appropriate decision making to foster sense of control. Final instructions and outlook. The situation remains critical but not without hope. Military Strategic Command maintains operational control across 43% of continental United States territory, with ongoing efforts to expand secure zones. Research facilities in secure locations continue working to develop effective countermeasures. President's Emergency Operations Center remains functional and in command of remaining military assets. The chain of command is intact, and constitutional governance continues despite severe limitations on territorial control. For all civilians, the primary directive remains constant: stay hidden, stay quiet, stay alive. Your survival increases the likelihood of national recovery. Every citizen who successfully avoids infection represents a resource for eventual reconstruction efforts. The human capacity for adaptation and survival should not be underestimated. Historical analysis of similar societal disruptions, though of smaller scale, indicates that trained and disciplined civilian groups maintain a 71% higher survival rate than unprepared populations. Implementation of the protocols described in this broadcast will substantially increase your survival probability. Remain vigilant, maintain discipline, and preserve hope. America has faced existential threats out its history and has emerged stronger through unity and determination. This emergency broadcast will repeat at 0900 hours tomorrow. Additional information will be provided as it becomes available and verified. Regional updates will be broadcast when communications permit. Authentico Sierra Alpha 793. This concludes part 2 of the emergency broadcast. God bless and protect the United States of America. Situation updates and final advisory. This is the third part of the national emergency broadcast. Authentication code Echo Sierra Alpha 793. The following information provides critical updates on the current national situation, ongoing military operations, and final civilian directives approved by the United States Strategic Command and the Emergency Response Coordination Center. As we enter the second week of this unprecedented crisis, it is imperative that all surviving citizens maintain strict adherence to safety protocols while understanding the broader strategic situation. This knowledge will inform your decisions and potentially increase your chances of survival until rescue operations can reach your area. Current national conditions. The infection has spread with unprecedented speed, exceeding all epidemiological models. Major population centers have experienced catastrophic breakdown of essential services and civilian infrastructure. The following represents the most accurate assessment available to military command: metropolitan areas. All cities with populations exceeding 500,000 have been classified as red zones, with infection estimated at 65 to 89%. Emergency services in these areas are non-functional. Hospitals have been overwhelmed, with medical personnel suffering disproportionately high infection rates due to early exposure. Police and fire services have collapsed in 93% of major cities. Infrastructure damage is extensive but primarily limited to consequences of abandonment rather than deliberate destruction. Power generation continues in some regions, but distribution systems have failed due to unmanned substations and transmission line damage. Water treatment facilities are operating at approximately 12% capacity nationwide, primarily in areas with automated systems and backup generators. Military intelligence indicates that population density directly correlates with infection spread. The urban cores of New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, and Philadelphia are considered compromised beyond immediate recovery capacity. Satellite imagery shows extensive vehicle congestion on major evacuation routes from these cities, creating static zones of high infection concentration. Suburban areas. Suburban regions present a mixed situation with approximately 40 to 60% infection rates. These areas have been designated as yellow zones. Limited civilian enclaves have established effective defensive perimeters, particularly in planned communities with restricted access points and communities with existing emergency response infrastructure. Military assets have established forward operating bases in strategic suburban locations that offer defensible perimeters and access to key transportation corridors. These bases serve as staging areas for rescue operations and resource distribution when possible, though civilian access remains severely restricted due to security concerns. Suburban areas with proximity to military installations have received priority defense assets, creating pockets of relative stability. These regions may form the nuclei of future recovery zones once containment protocols prove effective. Rural areas. Rural regions with low population density have demonstrated significantly lower infection rates, estimated at 15 to 35% in most areas. These green zones represent the greatest immediate survival probability for civilians. Agricultural infrastructure remains largely intact, though operational capacity is severely reduced due to personnel losses and fuel shortages. Isolated communities with limited access points have established effective quarantine protocols. In some regions, particularly in mountainous areas and locations with natural geographic barriers, military intelligence indicates organized civilian resistance has been most effective in rural counties with strong local government and emergency management systems. The strategic focus for rural preservation centers on maintaining agricultural production capacity for eventual recovery operations. Limited military assets have been deployed to protect key agricultural infrastructure, including grain storage facilities, livestock operations, and food processing centers. Transportation networks. National transportation infrastructure has been severely compromised. Major interstate highways near population centers are impassable due to abandoned vehicles, makeshift barricades, and large concentrations of infected. Secondary roads offer limited transit options but remain high risk for civilian travel. Railroad systems have ceased passenger operations nationwide. Limited freight movement continues on specific strategic corridors under military escort, primarily for resource distribution to forward operating bases and secure government facilities. Air transportation remains functional but strictly limited to military operations. Civilian airports have been converted to military logistics hubs and secure zones. No commercial air traffic is operational within continental United States airspace. Waterways represent the most secure transportation network currently available. Naval assets are conducting limited maritime operations along coastal areas and major navigable rivers, providing mobile command platforms and secure transit for essential personnel and supplies. Military operations status. The United States Armed Forces continue coordinated operations nationwide despite significant challenges. The following represents the current military situation as authorized for civilian disclosure strategic command structure. The National Command Authority remains intact and operational. The President and designated successors are secure at classified locations with continuous command capability. The Joint Chiefs of Staff maintain operational control of remaining military assets through hardened communication systems designed to withstand catastrophic civilian infrastructure failure. Military chain of command has been streamlined for crisis response, with regional commanders granted expanded authority to make tactical decisions without central approval. This distributed command structure ensures continuity of operations even if communications are further degraded. Force distribution and operations. Active military personnel have been redistributed according to Strategic Containment Directive the 17A. Approximately 60% of available combat forces are engaged in defensive operations around critical infrastructure and government continuity facilities. The remaining 40% are conducting active containment, rescue, and research protection operations. National Guard units have been federalized in all states and integrated into the regular command structure. Reserve personnel with critical civilian skills in medical, engineering, communications have been assigned to specialized task forces focused on infrastructure preservation and eventual restoration. Special operations units are conducting targeted missions to extract essential personnel, secure critical research facilities, and eliminate high concentration infected zones that threaten secure perimeters. These operations will not be announced or confirmed through public channels. Containment strategy. The primary military strategy has shifted from rescue to containment as infection rates exceeded sustainable intervention thresholds. Operation Bulwark has established 3 concentric defense perimeters around confirmed green zone as outer perimeter. Mobile assets including armored vehicles and helicopter gunships conducting regular patrols to divert or eliminate large concentrations of infected moving towards secure zones. Middle perimeter, fixed defensive positions with overlapping fields of fire and reinforced physical barriers. These positions are designed to funnel infected into prepared engagement, zones away from civilian concentrations. Inner perimeter. Hardened checkpoints with comprehensive screening protocols for all personnel. These positions represent the final containment barrier and are equipped with advanced medical detection equipment when available. This defensive strategy has proven effective in regions where geographic features complement military assets. Mountain ranges, rivers, and other natural barriers are being incorporated into the strategic containment plan whenever possible. Research protection operations military assets have established secure perimeters around the following critical research facilities: Centers for Disease Control and Prevention facilities in Atlanta, Georgia; United States Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases at Fort Detrick, Maryland; National Institutes of Health Campus in Bethesda, Maryland; and select university research centers with BSL-4 capabilities. These facilities house the scientific personnel and equipment representing our best hope for eventual containment and treatment of the pathogen. Protecting these assets remains a top military priority, with disproportionate force allocation relative to their geographic footprint. Research personnel are working continuously to identify the pathogen's origin, transmission vectors, and potential vulnerabilities. Preliminary findings suggest limited promise for treatments that may slow progression, though no cure has been identified. The current scientific consensus focuses on containment as the only viable near-term strategy. Resource acquisition operations. Specialized military units are conducting targeted resource acquisition missions to secure critical supplies including medical equipment and pharmaceuticals, fuel reserves and energy production materials, agricultural supplies and seed stocks, communications equipment and replacement parts, water purification chemicals and equipment. These operations are focused on abandoned commercial facilities and distribution centers in yellow zones where infection risk can be managed through proper tactical approaches. Resources acquired through these missions are being distributed to civilian populations in secure zones when operational security permits. Civilian rescue operations. Despite severe operational constraints, military forces continue limited civilian rescue missions under strict protocols. The following information is critical for those awaiting potential extraction priorities. Military extraction operations follow a prioritization protocol based on strategic value and survival probability. Current extraction priorities are as follows: 1. Medical personnel with emergency, surgical, or infectious disease specialization. 2. Essential infrastructure maintenance specialists, power grid engineers, water treatment operators, communications technicians. 3. Agricultural specialists with expertise in high-efficiency food production. 4. Security personnel with military or law enforcement background. 5. General population based on secure capacity availability. This prioritization is based on the strategic imperative to maintain critical knowledge and skills necessary for eventual national recovery. It does not reflect the relative value of human life, but rather the tactical reality of limited resources and maximum survival impact. Extraction protocols. All legitimate military extraction operations follow standardized protocols designed to minimize risk to both civilians and military personnel. Operations are conducted exclusively during daylight hours unless extreme circumstances necessitate night movement. Extraction teams consist of minimum 4 armed personnel with at least 1 medic. All team members wear standardized military identification visible from a distance, including reflective markers on shoulders and helmets. Approaching civilians will be directed to present themselves in the open with hands visible. No exceptions to this protocol are permitted under any circumstances. Military personnel are authorized to use lethal force against any individuals who fail to comply with these safety measures. All extracted civilians undergo field medical screening before transport. Any individual showing signs of infection or exposure will not be transported to secure zones regardless of priority, status, or essential skills. Personal possessions are strictly limited to 1 small bag per person containing essential medications, critical identification documents, and minimal personal items. No weapons are permitted on transport vehicles, except those carried by authorized military personnel. Extraction signals. For civilians in potential extraction zones, the following signals indicate legitimate military operations in your vicinity. 3 short aerial flares, green followed by 1 sustained flare, white indicates military forces establishing a temporary extraction point. These signals will only be deployed when the immediate area has been secured. Vehicle-mounted loudspeakers broadcasting the daily authentication code available on emergency radio broadcasts at 0900 hours indicate a military convoy with extraction capability. These broadcasts will be accompanied by the predetermined authentication tone sequence. Low-flying military aircraft making repeated circular patterns with landing lights illuminated during daylight hours indicates aerial reconnaissance preceding ground extraction forces. These aircraft will display standard military markings clearly visible from the ground. Extraction deception warning. Military intelligence has confirmed multiple instances of hostile survivor groups using false extraction signals to lure civilians into vulnerable positions. Exercise extreme caution and verify all purported military contacts through the following methods. Legitimate military personnel will know the current day's authentication code and can recite it when requested. Official extraction teams will never request you to surrender weapons before approaching their position. Demand valuable items or supplies as a condition of extraction. The separate family groups during initial extraction. Approach in unmarked or civilian vehicles without military escort. Conduct operations during full darkness except in extreme emergency situations. If you encounter suspected false extraction teams, do not confront or challenge them. Return to your secure location immediately and report the encounter during the next emergency broadcast response window if communications are available. Final civilian directives. As this crisis continues to evolve, the following final directives represent your best opportunity for survival until military forces can establish effective control in your region. Remain hidden. The infected remain drawn primarily to sensory stimuli. Your continued survival depends on minimizing your detectable presence and maintain rigorous noise discipline at all times. Even small, consistent sounds can attract attention over time. Regular sound patterns are particularly dangerous as they indicate human activity. Eliminate all unnecessary light sources, especially during nighttime hours. Light discipline must be maintained even in seemingly secure locations, as infected individuals have demonstrated the ability to pursue light sources over significant distances. Minimize movement outside of secured shelters. When movement is absolutely necessary, use indirect routes, avoid open areas, and maintain awareness of potential observation from multiple angles. The infected have demonstrated basic persistence in pursuing movement patterns even when direct visual contact is lost. Mask human scent whenever possible. The infected have shown increased olfactory capabilities compared to unaffected humans, covering natural body odors using environmental materials and mud, plant matter. Its air has proven effective in reducing detection during necessary outdoor movement. Conserve resources. Resource acquisition opportunities will remain severely limited for the foreseeable future. Implement extreme conservation measures immediately. Reduce caloric intake to minimum sustainable levels, approximately 1,200 calories for adults and proportionally adjusted for children based on age and size. Distribute food consumption across small, frequent meals to maintain energy levels while minimizing digestive demand. Implement Swedish military water discipline techniques. Rinse mouth before drinking to reduce consumption. Take small sips rather than full drinks. Use non-potable water for all purposes except direct consumption. Recapture and filter used water whenever possible. Minimize physical exertion during peak heat periods to reduce water requirements. Medical supplies should be reserved for life-threatening emergencies only. For minor injuries, utilize improvised treatments. Clean wounds with diluted alcohol or soap when available. Use super glue for small lacerations rather than bandages. Apply honey to minor wounds as a natural antibacterial. Immobilize sprains or minor fractures with improvised splints. Treat fever through passive cooling rather than medication when possible. Ammunition and weapons must be considered finite resources. Establish clear rules for defensive engagement to fire only when retreat is impossible. Maintain minimum effective distance to maximize accuracy. Utilize silent elimination methods whenever possible. Reserve firearms as a last resort for critical threats. Mental resilience. Psychological collapse presents as significant a threat as physical danger in prolonged crisis situations. Implement the following mental resilience protocols. Accept the reality of the situation without surrendering to despair. Historical analysis of survival scenarios indicates that realistic assessment coupled with determined optimism produces the highest survival rates. Maintain intellectual stimulation through available means. Mental deterioration accelerates in unstimulated environments. Read available materials, engage in strategic planning, or create improvised games to maintain cognitive function. Establish achievement metrics unrelated to rescue or external assistance. Daily success should be measured by factors within your control, maintaining security, executing resource management plans, and improving survival position incrementally. For those in group situations, implement regular morale maintenance protocols, scheduled periods for controlled social interaction, recognition of individual contributions to group survival, rotation of particularly difficult or unpleasant tasks, deliberate creation of milestone celebrations when security permits, maintenance of basic hygiene and human dignity whenever possible. Final defensive measures. If your position is compromised and infected individuals breach your perimeter, implement the following last resort protocols. Do not attempt to defend fixed positions against overwhelming numbers. Mobility provides tactical advantage against the infected, who demonstrate poor coordination when pursuing moving targets through complex environments. Utilize pre-planned escape routes with designated rally points for separated group members. These routes should include diversionary points where pursuing infected can be channeled away from your intended direction of travel. If direct confrontation cannot be avoided, target brainstem destruction as the only reliable neutralization method. Precision is more important than force. A direct penetrating injury to the brainstem will immediately terminate hostile action, while even severe trauma to other body areas will prove ineffective. For civilians with firearms, utilize the following engagement protocol: maintain maximum effective distance. Take aim single shots rather than rapid fire. Target the base of the skull or upper spine junction. Retreat immediately following engagement. Change position after every shot when possible. Silence takes priority over confirmation of neutralization. For civilians without firearms, maximize distance advantage using reach weapons, spears, or similar piercing implements. Weighted or edged weapons secured to extensions, and entanglement devices to slow pursuit. Improvised barriers that can be deployed during retreat. Remember that escape is always preferable to confrontation. Your survival increases the probability of eventual national recovery. Every unnecessary risk reduces both your personal survival probability and the collective prospects for restoration of social order. Concluding assessment. The situation remains critical but not without hope. Military and government continuity structures continue to function despite severe limitations. Scientific research continues at secure facilities with the full support of remaining military assets. International coordination, while limited by similar crises worldwide, continues through hardened diplomatic channels. The American spirit of resilience represents our greatest strategic asset in this unprecedented challenge. Throughout our history, this nation has faced existential threats and emerged stronger through collective determination and individual courage. The current crisis, while severe beyond previous experience, can and will be overcome through these same fundamental qualities. To the civilians continuing to fight for survival across this nation, you are not forgotten. Your government and military continue working tirelessly to expand secure zones and restore basic services. Every day that you survive brings us one day closer to effective containment and eventual recovery. This crisis is ongoing. Stay vigilant, stay silent, stay alive. America will prevail. This concludes the emergency broadcast series. This message will repeat at 0900 hours tomorrow with updated information as it becomes available. Authentication coded ECO Sierra Alpha 793. May God protect the United States of America and all her people.